Have Gun, Will Travel, Season 6, Episode 14. Trial at Table Rock. Detailed summary. Have Gun, Will Travel Season 6, Episode 14. Trial at Table Rock. Aired on December 15, 1962. The episode places Paladin in a role that is unusual even for him. Instead of acting primarily as a hired gun, he becomes the defense attorney for a man whom nearly everyone in town already considers guilty. The story revolves around Verge Beach, a notorious gunfighter, Adams, the local prosecutor, and a killing that appears to provide the perfect opportunity to finally put Beach behind bars. The episode is built around one of the series' strongest recurring ideas, the difference between justice and revenge. Adams wants Beach removed from Table Rock because he believes Beach has repeatedly gotten away with murder. Yet when the circumstances surrounding a new killing become more complicated than expected, Paladin finds himself defending the very man he was originally asked to eliminate. The story begins with Paladin arriving in Table Rock and quickly discovering that the town has a serious problem. Verge Beach has developed a reputation as a dangerous gunman who repeatedly provokes other men into fighting him. Beach's method is particularly disturbing because he creates situations in which the other man is pushed into drawing first or accepting a duel. Once the gunfight begins, Beach kills his opponent and then claims that he acted in self-defense. On paper, the explanation may appear legitimate. In practice, however, everyone understands that Beach has deliberately engineered these confrontations. He knows how to manipulate angry men, knows how to push their pride, and knows that his speed with a gun gives him a tremendous advantage once the shooting begins. The result is a string of deaths that technically resemble fair fights, but are morally much darker. One of the men killed in this manner is the brother of Adams, Table Rock's district prosecutor. Adams therefore has both professional and personal reasons for wanting Beach gone. To Adams, Beach is not simply another outlaw or troublesome gunfighter. He is a murderer who has repeatedly exploited the law. Every time Beach kills another man and successfully claims self-defense, Adams is forced to watch the justice system fail. The death of his own brother makes the situation even more personal. His anger has grown into an obsession, and he wants Beach permanently removed from the town. This creates the first major moral problem of the episode. Adams may have a legitimate complaint, but his personal hatred makes it difficult for him to remain impartial. Adams approaches Paladin and asks him to take care of Beach. His request is not presented as a normal legal assignment. He wants Paladin to eliminate Beach, essentially treating him as a problem that can be solved by a professional gunfighter. Adams knows Paladin's reputation and assumes that he can persuade him to do what the local authorities have failed to accomplish. But Paladin immediately refuses. He is willing to kill when circumstances genuinely require it, but he is not an assassin for hire. He will not murder a man simply because another person believes that the man deserves to die. This decision establishes Paladin's moral position very clearly. He may be a gunfighter, but he has rules. He refuses to become an instrument of personal revenge. Adams is frustrated by Paladin's refusal. From his perspective, Beach has already escaped justice too many times. He believes the law is powerless because Beach knows exactly how to manipulate the rules. Every confrontation ends with Beach claiming self-defense, and the lack of witnesses willing to contradict him makes prosecution difficult. Adams therefore believes that someone outside the normal system must finally take action. Paladin, however, recognizes the danger in that reasoning. If people are allowed to kill others simply because they believe the law is inadequate, then there is no meaningful distinction between justice and vengeance. A society cannot function if every angry person can appoint himself judge, jury, and executioner. This philosophical conflict sits at the heart of the episode. While Paladin refuses Adams's request, another gunfighter appears who is willing to take the job. This man sees Beach's reputation as a challenge and believes that he can eliminate him. Unlike Paladin, he has no hesitation about turning the matter into a gunfight. His confidence suggests that he sees himself as the man capable of doing what others are unwilling to do. He confronts Beach, and the two men engage in a fair gunfight. But the result is disastrous. Beach survives, while the gunslinger who challenged him is killed. The death dramatically changes the situation. Adams now has the opportunity he has been waiting for. He claims that he personally witnessed Beach kill the man in cold blood. Suddenly, there is a direct accusation that could finally put Beach on trial. The town moves quickly. A trial is arranged, and Beach becomes the defendant in a murder case. At first glance, the situation appears simple. Adams is the prosecutor, Beach is the accused murderer, and there is supposedly a witness who can testify that the killing was deliberate. Yet Paladin has seen enough of the situation to recognize that appearances can be misleading. He knows Beach is dangerous, but he also knows that Adams has a personal motive to see him convicted. That means the prosecution's case must be examined carefully. What makes the episode especially interesting is Paladin's decision to defend Beach. This is not because Paladin suddenly believes Beach is a good man. Quite the opposite. Paladin understands that Beach is manipulative, violent, and extremely dangerous. He also knows that Beach has probably caused enormous suffering in the community. Nevertheless, Paladin believes that a man accused of murder deserves a fair trial. No matter how unpleasant the defendant may be, justice cannot depend on whether the community likes him. Paladin therefore offers his services as Beach's defense attorney when no one else wants the job. This decision shocks many of the people in Table Rock. They cannot understand why Paladin would defend someone with Beach's reputation. To them, the case seems obvious. Beach is dangerous, and they want him punished. Paladin's response is essentially that punishment must be based on proof, not reputation. A man's history may make him suspicious, but it cannot automatically establish his guilt in a particular case. This principle is especially important because Beach has created a reputation for himself that may make it almost impossible for him to receive an impartial hearing. Everyone already expects him to be guilty. Paladin realizes that this makes the defense even more necessary. As the trial begins, the conflict between Paladin and Adams becomes increasingly intense. Adams is convinced that Beach is finally trapped. He believes he has the evidence and the witness necessary to secure a conviction. Paladin, however, carefully examines the circumstances of the shooting. He asks questions that Adams does not want to answer and challenges assumptions that everyone else has accepted. His goal is not to prove that Beach is innocent of everything he has ever done. His goal is much narrower: to determine whether Beach committed this particular murder under circumstances that justify conviction. This distinction is essential. A person can be morally reprehensible and still be entitled to a fair trial. Paladin refuses to confuse the two questions. He knows that if the law is allowed to punish people simply because they have bad reputations, then the legal system becomes no better than the vigilante justice Adams originally wanted to use against Beach. As Paladin investigates, he begins examining the relationship between Beach and the dead gunfighter. He considers the possibility that the confrontation was exactly what Beach always claims it was: a gunfight initiated by another man. If that is true, then the prosecution's argument becomes much weaker. But Paladin also understands that Beach has a history of provoking men into duels. This means the case cannot be evaluated purely on the question of who drew first. The deeper question is whether Beach deliberately created circumstances in which he could kill while maintaining the appearance of self-defense. The episode therefore explores a fascinating moral gray area. Beach may be technically skilled at staying within the boundaries of the law while violating its spirit. He knows that if he can make another man draw his weapon first, he can claim that he had no choice but to shoot. This makes him extremely difficult to prosecute. Paladin recognizes the manipulation but also knows that proving manipulation in court is another matter entirely. The courtroom scenes emphasize the difference between suspicion and evidence. Adams presents the case from the perspective of a prosecutor who has spent years watching Beach escape punishment. His anger is understandable, especially because Beach was connected to the death of his brother. But his personal feelings create a danger. He may interpret every piece of evidence in the way most favorable to conviction. Paladin repeatedly challenges this tendency. The defense strategy is therefore not based on pretending that Beach is innocent in every moral sense. Instead, Paladin forces the prosecution to prove the specific accusation beyond reasonable doubt. He questions witnesses, examines contradictions, and challenges the certainty of Adams's account. The more he investigates, the clearer it becomes that the case is not as simple as the townspeople believe. This puts Paladin in an uncomfortable position. He knows that if Beach is acquitted, the man may continue manipulating other people into gunfights. The town could face another killing. Paladin therefore understands the frustration of those who want Beach punished. But he also recognizes that allowing a prosecutor to manipulate the legal system for personal revenge would establish a dangerous precedent. The episode's title, Trial at Table Rock, is therefore about more than a courtroom proceeding. It is a trial of the entire community's understanding of justice. Beach is technically the defendant, but Adams's motives are also being examined. The townspeople are forced to confront their own desire for revenge. Paladin becomes the person standing between an unpopular defendant and a community that has already decided what it wants the verdict to be. As the case develops, Paladin's skill as a lawyer proves to be as impressive as his skill with a gun. He approaches the courtroom the same way he approaches a gunfight, calmly, carefully, and without allowing emotion to control him. Every question has a purpose. Every contradiction matters. He understands that the smallest inconsistency can change the interpretation of an entire event. At the same time, Beach's personality becomes increasingly revealing. He is not a sympathetic character, and Paladin does not attempt to make him one. Beach is arrogant and confident, fully aware of his reputation. He seems almost amused that Paladin has chosen to defend him. Yet, even Beach cannot completely understand Paladin's motivation. He is accustomed to people acting because they want money, revenge, or power. Paladin's commitment to principle is harder for him to understand. That difference highlights one of Paladin's defining qualities. He does not need to like someone in order to defend their rights. His moral code does not depend on personal affection. In fact, defending someone he dislikes makes his principles more convincing. If Paladin only protected people he considered good, his actions would be ordinary. By defending Beach, he demonstrates that justice must apply even to people who appear undeserving of sympathy. The trial eventually reaches its crucial point as the evidence surrounding the shooting is reconstructed. Paladin's questions expose weaknesses in the prosecution's version of events. The testimony does not necessarily prove what Adams claims it proves. Details that seemed insignificant at first become important when examined carefully. Paladin's insistence on precision prevents the case from becoming a simple popularity contest. The ultimate resolution reinforces the episode's central message. Paladin is not trying to make Beach look innocent as a person. He is trying to determine whether the legal evidence supports the charge. This distinction allows the episode to avoid an easy moral conclusion. Beach remains a dangerous man, but the community cannot simply kill him because it believes he deserves it. Adams may have suffered genuine loss, but his grief does not automatically give him the right to manipulate justice. The story also demonstrates the danger of relying on reputation. Beach's reputation as a killer makes it easy for everyone to assume that he must have committed the latest killing exactly as Adams describes. But Paladin refuses to accept that assumption. He insists on separating what everyone believes about Beach from what can actually be proved. In the end, Paladin's actions preserve the integrity of the legal process. He has not necessarily solved every problem in Table Rock, and Beach's future remains complicated. But Paladin has prevented the town from turning a courtroom into an instrument of revenge. His decision to defend Beach becomes an example of the principle that justice must be strongest when it is most difficult to apply. Trial at Table Rock is ultimately a story about the uncomfortable side of justice. It asks whether a person deserves a fair trial, even when almost everyone believes he is guilty. It examines how grief can turn into vengeance and how a legitimate desire for justice can become corrupted by personal hatred. Through Paladin, the episode argues that the law must be applied according to evidence rather than emotion. The story also demonstrates that Paladin's greatest strength is not his gun, but his moral independence. He refuses to become an assassin for Adams, refuses to accept the town's assumptions, and ultimately takes responsibility for defending a man he knows may be dangerous. By the conclusion, the viewer is left with a complicated but powerful idea. Justice is not measured by how strongly people want someone